process is normalizing certain experiences, but that can't include trauma, stereotypes, racism. So get curious. Wonder why these diseases are so prevalent in the family. Is it diet? Is it exercise? Or is it food deserts, systemic racism, or the everyday weight of Blackness? On to the next topic, right? Wokeness. I told you I was going to go through them fast. We don't have a lot of time. Wokeness. How much is wokeness getting in the way of building a strong alliance with clients? Take, for example, a client reports their experience with a white clinician with whom she has an amazing rapport. She's been working with for a year. So they have a great relationship. She shares with her therapist a fear of the rapture of God, questioning, am I living right? The therapist proceeds to comment on the history of Christianity in Black communities, how Christianity was weaponized to enslave African people. The therapist asks humorously, do you really think white Jesus is going to come down and destroy the world? The discussion moved away from exploring the client's concerns of living right to now defending her religious beliefs regarding the role of Christianity in her life. Although I understand the intent, and yes, learning about history and intentionally searching for opportunities to expand and to change is important and it's vital. There's a time and space to share your revelations. Black women, people of color deserve spaces where they do not have to defend non-negotiable parts of themselves. And lastly, we'll talk about language. Language is important in the Black community. Oftentimes, a simple way Black people unburden themselves when in a safe space is through the use of African-American vernacular English. As a non-BIPOC clinician, your job is not to respond in the language or to try to mimic it or in any way, right? Your job is to not impede the storytelling, to expand your vocabulary, especially if it's not significant to your understanding or moving the therapeutic process forward. No one wants to stop a story 10 times to explain the meaning of an insignificant colloquialism. This is a huge part of having to unpack the backpack that Black clients experience when working with white clinicians. If you hear saying a quote, a term that you're unsure of, look it up. Expand your vocabulary, but do it after the session. Do it on your own time. So there is a few things that I hope that we can note. First and foremost, having similar intersections as your client doesn't eliminate the underbelly of the work. I mean, Fiona said it herself. She had never worked with queer couples at the time. It was the first time, and she was able to move forward with that process. We don't have to have necessarily the same intersections or have done it before, but listening to experiences, offering compassion, empathy, and being unassuming are all tools we use every day with clients, regardless of their identities, right? Meaning, I don't think the moment you see a Black woman walk into your office, you should immediately search your roster of BIPOC clinicians, unless of course, you have an unwillingness to address the aforementioned points with it. Secondly, recognize that racism is paralyzing and community is mobilizing. Encourage BIPOC clients to find community within their cultural or racial identities. Simple. Third, don't be afraid to address race from the point of intake. The moment the person walks into the room, why not? We're here, we're talking about their life anyway. Address at intake. When you talk about race, you help to create a safe space for clients to talk about race. Part of the marginalized community's burden is worrying about the majority's discomfort. The same way you may address if you are let's say a white man with a white client who was sexually assaulted by a man. You'd address it. You're assessing for safety and comfort in the space, and that's vital. Regardless of what the identities are, it has to be addressed. Fourth, unpack your own backpack with privilege. Race, gender, socioeconomic status, nationality, ableism, education, sexuality, gender identity, all of it, etc. Right? We all know them. Instead of looking at these factors as barriers to connection, view your acknowledgement as bridges. How much easier is it to meet someone where they are if you identify the potential detours before you even get on the road? Does that not make the trip a little bit easier? 5, it's not about you. Okay, this one's my favorite. It's not about you. In the therapy room, it's not the place to explore your discomfort. I'm sorry, it's not. It's not the place to bring your beliefs to the forefront. It's not about your specific ideas or ideologies. I, as a Black woman, have to sit in the therapeutic space with white clients, justifying use of the N-word, stating all lives matter, and then reminding me of their alliance because of their children being biracial. Okay, so if I can sit in that space, you can sit in this space. Okay. When your world is challenged in the space, that's okay. Sit in it. Sit in the discomfort and explore it during supervision. That's the time. Lastly, I know y'all are tired. I know you're tired of hearing about race, about injustice, about diversity, all the words that have seemed to gain steam for white people in the last 3 years. But take a moment. Think about how exhausted you feel. Think about how uncomfortable you feel addressing race. The fear that takes over in saying the wrong thing or coming off as racist. Feel that weight on your chest, that knot in your stomach. Do the hairs on your arms stand up? Does your heart rate speed up just a little bit, or maybe a lot of it? And I want you to multiply that feeling by 10, and then imagine carrying it around every single day. Your exhaustion has a switch. You can leave this room, you can leave this space and never think about this topic again. That's privilege. So thank you for unpacking that privilege and meeting me and the rest of the panelists in this space. Thank you for coming to this room with empathy. I appreciate you.
Wow, that was awesome, Danica. Thank you so much for sharing what you did, for being vulnerable, all of the panelists for being vulnerable and sharing your space. I want to make sure that we continue to allow a safe space and allowing the panelists to share more. But the heart and thought behind all of this is we want to make sure that we are solution focused, that we are supportive, because we're all in this field for a reason. So I do want to go back to Marcus to be able to share, and we'll also open up shortly for Q&A. And myself and Andy, as the moderators, will be asking some questions in addition to, if the attendees have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A section so we can add that as well. But Marcus, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. And I think that I'm just going to echo what my colleagues have already said. A lot of individuals want to know, where does this actually happen? And it actually happens in your first session. It happens by addressing all of the insecurities that it will take to impact that therapeutic relationship at the very beginning. So what does that mean? It means that sometimes you're going to have to address the elephant that's in the room, not calling anyone an animal and not calling the elephant's name, right? But that you're going to have to say something. And it doesn't have to be initially, right? You don't have to say right after you close the door, well, I'm white, you're Black. How's that going to affect your relationship? No. Hi, my name is Marcus. I'm so glad that you're here today. What should I call you by, right? Or how should I refer to you? Tell me, what brings you in today? Not giving them the definition. Well, I see that you have been angry and that you've been hurting people. Open-ended questions. Tell me, what brings you in today? Affirm what they've said. Wow, I know exactly how that feels. Or maybe, you know what, I don't know how it feels for you, but I've had similar experiences. Tell me about how that feels for you. Now, let me use your words. It sounds like when people see you differently than what you said that you are, it hurts. Did I get that right? Open-ended question, leading to something that can then help to forge that next question. So how can I minimize us having that interaction so that we do not do harm to each other while we're here? Setting those boundaries, helping them to formulate words that probably they've never got an opportunity or had an opportunity to express. Also, allowing them to be seen. And then I think it was Fiona, but all of us have said, allow that client to be heard and valued for who they actually are, right? So calling them by their names, recognizing who they are by identities or terms that reflect who they feel that they are inside, helping them to come to grips that the problem may not be with them and that it's okay to have bad days. It's okay to be indifferent, but that we then get to have the tools or the actions to change that if we choose to. Let's unpack that. So providing in that first session, really the roadway that helps them to not only navigate who you are, because they have questions about you and what you may be thinking about them, but also addressing what could be very insensitive from the very beginning. And that's truly how we start to unpack our own insecurities, right? That I can go to someone and say, I really do not know what it is to be you or what it is to have experiences like you. I've heard from others that it's difficult. Let's talk about that. Let's also talk about what this relationship may look like as we build this therapeutic alliance. And then how do we check in with one another if we feel that one is not knowing or doing something that may be addressing some of the things that we have to unpack in our backpacks or carry with us in our backpacks every day? These things aren't so difficult to do. It just takes one simple intervention, asking open-ended questions and being willing to hear uncomfortable answers. That's my thoughts. Others can chime in if they would like to, but that's kind of what I wanted to lead the group with.
And just to piggyback off of what Marcus shared, I think as clinicians, I had mentioned this, that like supervision and consultation, those are not things that we just do while we're trying to get licensed, that those are ongoing pieces of our work as therapists and pieces that we're doing together collectively within our field, because I think things within our field are always changing and evolving, and we should be doing the same, right? And always learning and keeping that space. Like, I think as clinicians, it's so vital for us to really kind of live by that philosophy that we're lifelong learners and we don't know it all. Because when we get to fully be going back to that vulnerability piece, we let go of that idea that we are always right, or that our experience is the end all be all. So, I think as you're thinking about ways that this impacts your work with clients, remembering that like consultation, supervision, and all of those are part of being part of the therapeutic community and working harder to be to show up in the ways that we want our clients to show up.
Thank you so much, Fiona, for adding on to that. Andy, I want to go ahead and give you a chance to, I think you were going to ask a question or share.
Yeah, I am very struck, Danica, by the imagining working with a client that said all lives matter. And I will disclose as a client that I had a counselor sort of minimize the George Floyd experience, right? He was passing counterfeit bills or something like that. And for me at the time, that was really upsetting. And I actually didn't tolerate the therapeutic relationship anymore after that. I felt such a distance between myself and the counselor. And I want to also own that my enthusiasm for this work puts me in a little bit of a different space than with white counselors, but I was sensitive to it. And then I had the experience as a counselor with a client that was using racist terms. And I think I approached it differently than you did, and than you do, and then what you're talking about. So I wanted to kind of get clear about that. And I also wanted to acknowledge that my social location may make it easier for me to say to a client, don't use racist language in my counseling room. I'm not comfortable with it. And I'm also curious if I made a mistake there, right? Like what you're talking about, Danica, is sort of making room for bigotry. And then what Fiona suggested here is that we want to model the behavior that we want our clients to have, in a sense. So I'm curious about your experience with that, and kind of how you would hold a boundary with a client when their behavior is I don't know, beyond the pale may be the wrong phrase, but do your best with this, and thanks for entertaining the question.
I think it's important. We hold space for clients, right? So it's not holding space for bigotry, but you don't know what a client's going to come in the room with, right? So we don't know when we see someone, okay, this person's going to hit every button that I know that I have. You're gonna go across every line that I've drawn. I don't know that when the person walks into my room. So in the moment, it's giving myself the time to pause, like, did you just say this word? And then almost allowing my silence to be the thing, which is what I do, honestly, in every environment. When someone it triggers me in a certain way, I ask a question and then I shut up, because I want to give you the space to now talk yourself into circles to realize what you just said and how it impacted the space, right? So it's not necessarily that I'm giving room for bigotry, it's I gave you room to be who you are and you just showed me who you are. And now we both have to sit in that discomfort of who you are.
I like that response, Angie. I don't know
Yeah.
if that was what you were, if that was kind of where you were going with it.
Well, it's a really interesting response. I marinate on that. I also want to get the pronunciation of your name correctly, Danica. So thanks for that. Yeah, I could sit in the discomfort with the client. I'm not quite sure, getting at the underneath, right, which is a kind of sense of shock and a boundary crossing. The client knew that I had this boundary, crossed the boundary intentionally. And so being able to discuss that, I notice right now that you're crossing a boundary that you knew about. You're also inducing shock. And I'm wondering if there was a time in your life when somebody crossed your boundaries and shocked you with their behavior. And out came this history of incarceration at 13 and 14 years old, where he had been abused by other kids in juvenile. And so the shock that was living in him was just created, in me through this, bigoted behavior. So it was sort of like, okay, we can sit back and maybe work with this therapeutically if I can get over my sort of, hey, I've got this boundary, don't cross it. That may actually be more appropriate in a friendship or a colleague context than in a therapeutic context.
I think it's important to note that, and maybe this is my opinion as a Black clinician, but there's also a level of having to honor our own needs as clinicians, right? So I don't have to continue working with this person. This is not a boundary that I should have had to share with you. I'm a Black woman, I shouldn't need to tell you as a white person, don't say the N-word to in front of me, to me, to don't justify it. That those are not questions that I think that I need to have, whether I'm in the therapeutic space or not. So there is that portion of, it's like a line between humanness and then being a clinician, right? Because I'm a clinician doesn't mean I get to be the target of your, I'm not the, what is that game where you throw the darts? I'm not the target, right? So I can leave the space. I can terminate. These are grounds for termination. Like I shouldn't have to sit in this space. And maybe that's something that people don't agree with. But as a Black woman, I don't feel that I should have to do the work of correcting your racism, or that person's is what I mean, Andy.
Right.
And so just to mention, that's exactly, these conversations are so important. Right now, we are all learning that these things happen, and they happen to seasoned individuals. And we still do not know how to navigate or talk about or set, but we still lean on each other. And that's what we're really trying to cultivate with these, what I think is that this is what we're trying to cultivate, is that it's okay to have these questions. It's okay to bring these thoughts. It's okay that your client is going to bring these same ideologies with them. It'd be important that you have a community that we have right now, that we can talk about these things, that we can say how and what they may feel and how they impose on our lives, both professionally and personally. And then we get to build, because we've had these conversations, not only to just make sure that we're learning more, but that we're being better practitioners at the end of the day.
Thank you for sharing that. I have a question that I want to present to the panelists, because we have a nice amount of attendees here, and I want to make sure that we're providing realistic and reasonable kind of expectations for individuals to be put in place. How can we come up with helpful strategies that can be seen through a lens that's not within the BIPOC community, without causing additional and more harm? Fiona, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, can you ask that one more time?
So the idea, part of this, we're talking about the scenarios and examples and the aggressions and microaggressions, macroaggressions. We may understand that verbiage, and like Danica shared, and I agree with, to be more in that place of, I'm wondering, I want to be hungry to understand so that I'm not causing more harm. How can we make that realistic and practical? And as a clinic owner in the BIPOC community and LGBTQI2Ss, did I say it right? Community, I want to, respect all the communities that we have here today. How do we make that realistic? Because it sounds good and it sounds practical, but when we get our hands in the dirt, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think when we're thinking about how we get to, like, yeah, how do we get to that place? Like, all of this, yes, sounds really great. I mean, I think a big piece of it is really kind of doing our own work initially. That would be step one, doing our own work, really. And I think it's a lot of identity work. It's also like understanding our own stereotypes, our own biases that come up. I would say the other piece is really like kind of going out of your comfort zone and reaching out to communities that maybe you don't know very much about, or have some distress or some reaction to, and being able to learn more about those communities. And then it comes back to number one, right? Like, why does that create discomfort and distress for you? And there's so many organizations, I think, especially for like group practice owners or people who work in like community, like agency settings or community mental health. Like, I think there's so many nonprofit organizations that are willing to come and provide these educational, series or different speaking on different topics for your organization. And so to be able to outreach those places and just be open to the services and resources that are within your community, because most of us work and live in the communities where we're at. So these are the services that also like are there for your client. So being able to kind of better understand your client population and who it is that you're working with. And then I think also just like really sitting with this piece that like no question is dumb, right? Like we tend to think that like, ooh, like I can't ask that. Like, and we live in a society that really is comfort driven, that no one wants to be distressed. I mean, we think of fast food, that's a very tangible example. We can get our coffee in minutes. And so we really live in this place of being in an area that is comfortable. And so I encourage all people to live outside of that comfort zone and be able to, you don't have to jump right in, but you can dip your toe in it a little at a time and then get it, fully immerse yourself so that, you can better serve your clients.
Thank you.
Fiona,
I'm sorry, Marcus, I saw your hand up, but wanted you to tag in as well.
Yeah, so Fiona, I actually want to just continue that conversation with the idea of taking your time. When I was thinking about that terminology as I was just going through things, I recalled a movie that had just captured everything about taking your time. And the movie is rather old movie. It's called Losing Isaiah. And that movie really focused on a mother who did not know how to take care of her son, but had a son. And she had her own issues that she was going through at the time, and that she had discarded her son into a garbage can. And luckily, before anything happened to this baby boy, someone came to his rescue. And then after he was medically fit and was able to be released, he was adopted by a white family who then moved him to a predominantly white area. And the movie kind of goes on. I'm not going to give it all away. I really would wish that you would take time to watch it. That this new mom, who is white, kept him in a very secluded neighborhood. And that when his mother came back after working on herself and getting herself back together and wanting to forge that relationship, had stopped, impeded that from happening. And then when Isaiah's mother went to talk to her and said that, how are you going to raise a Black kid when you won't even know how to comb his hair? Taking the time to do things that you ordinarily would not do. And so while everything Fiona just said was absolutely correct, I would also just extend it and say, take some time. And that sometimes it just takes that time that you start to develop and understand the things that just are foreign to you. I won't tell you how the movie concludes because, again, I would like you to take some time, but the ending is worth seeing.
That is an awesome movie, and I put that in a classic one that does hit home. That's a very good one. So we have a few questions in the Q&A that I want to read off the questions, and I will leave it up to panelists to be able to jump in and answer the question. So we have the first question, and it says, as a white group practice owner committed to anti-racist practice, we are developing a more in-depth multicultural training sequence for our incoming interns and providers in general. Most of our interns are white, and I lead most of our trainings currently. I would love to hear your opinions on how to best approach these trainings. Who is best to take the lead on these trainings? Should I take a back seat on them and have our supervisors of color be the leads? I'm trying to gauge when being challenged by a white person is more versus less effective than trainings done by BIPOC people. That's a very good question. So kind of twofold. So I'll just repeat the questions and we'll answer them one at a time. So the first question is, who is best to take lead on these diversity anti-racist trainings? Marcus?
I'm just going to start it off. Please, this is not going to be a full answer. Who's ever done the work to take the lead to have the conversation? It doesn't matter who the person is. If you have done the work, willing to continue the work and acknowledge the work that you still need to do, I think you would be the perfect person. But I just wanted to start the conversation.
I kind of want to tag on to that because I agree the person who does the work is the best qualified to do it. However, this kind of it kind of tags on to what Andy was asking about earlier, as far as when it comes to addressing issues of racism, the best people to address issues of racism with white people is white people. It's not Black people. It's not it's not the marginalized community. So I know this is different. We're talking about trainings and things like that, but understanding your privilege and your power in that position to actually make a change, it's vital.
And then Andy, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm just reminded of Hidden Figures, when in a movie recently with the Black mathematicians, it was actually the Kevin Costner role, the white guy role, to create safety in the workspace for her. So they had set up a coffee pot for Black folk and for white folk. And the boss came in and said, that is totally inappropriate, right? And in a sense, like if the leadership of the clinics, and I'm a leader of a clinic, right, set a tone for, we all have to do our work, I'm doing my work, like, let's keep doing this. That's kind of our responsibility. And if we don't do that, then I think and what I've heard is, people with marginal identities start feeling like they don't have support, they don't feel safe in there. So it's a good question, though. Thank you.
It's a very good question. And I will add on to it with saying we say we should model for our clients how to navigate, how to be in the sessions. It's the same way, especially as clinic owners. I'm a clinic owner as well. And I will put the stamp on what Marcus and Danica were saying. It's who has done the work. You may have, we've talked about colorism and different terms that have come up. We have that within our own races and communities and cultures. So you may have a person of color who has not done the work, but you may have a white clinician or mental health provider that has done the work, that is more versed. So that is the essence. So I think this question, it's our first question, is embodying kind of the essence of this training. You have voices and there is white privilege, it is a thing, but learning how to navigate and sit with the reality of what comes with that. It may be pros and cons with that, but for this one right here, you are the clinic director. Tag your it, the weight is on you. And, it sounds like you've been doing the work for doing that and you model that for your team. So the next question we have is, I'm going to read the question off. I hear a fair amount of assuming. Let's not assume what the client says or where they're coming from due to their race or the community they affiliate with. When I meet clients, I don't focus on what or how they are expressing themselves. That can come later. The priority is, what are they here for? Then we can work on polishing, so to speak. That was more of a statement, but I found out it was more of a statement. Does anyone want to add to that or agreement or share anything before we move to the next one?
Well, I have a knee-jerk response, which I'm always skeptical of, and that's we cannot be conscious of our unconscious bias, right? It's called unconscious for a reason. So I think it's more realistic to say I am going to form opinions based on first impressions, and then to be cognizant of that, right? Understand what my first impressions are. That we can't judge a book by its cover, that somebody could be coming in with a very different lived experience than what we expect. But I don't think we can sort of turn that off. I think we have to kind of work with it, maybe.
Okay. The next question, what would be some appropriate questions when addressing race at intake?
I think that starting with intersections is a good way to kind of begin that conversation. You already have noticed I'm Black. These things. It's in front of you. It's obvious, right? When we're talking about the questions that we're asking during intake, even more so, like deeper. Your gender expression or sexuality or nationality, like where you're from. Like I said, I'm first generation American. So I literally have family members that cannot come to this country, right? So when we're talking about those things in intake, it's asking the questions at the beginning, like, how does this impact your experience? Whatever the intersection is, how does this impact your experience? What have been your experiences in the past with therapy, if you do have experiences? What are your experiences with any type of health services in the past based on some of these varying identities or whatever the intersections are, the person present? It's not tippy-toeing around the question, right? It's just asking, what is your experience? How does this impact your day? How do you see that this thing is impacting whatever your presenting problem is or whatever the person comes to you with?
I would just also note that if they are having, so a lot of clients will say that I would like someone who racially matches, right? That we're giving them that opportunity, that we're not turning them down, that we're giving them a warm handoff to someone that can be. Not saying that they can't be seen, but hey, you know what? You get to deserve to be with someone that you think can do the work with you. So let me give you some resources on that and providing them that connection. Would you like me to be with you when you make that first phone call? Or is that something that you would like to do by yourself, right? So just following what Danica said is, open-ended questions. How can we help you to express yourself, but also get to the bottom of what we need to do here, right? And yeah.
And I'll add on to that. And I do want to go back to the previous statement. I don't want the individual to feel dismissed because it does align with what Marcus was sharing. I am a woman of color. And like Eddie was saying, you walk in, when someone walks in or sees my picture on Psychology Today, you see that. And so it goes from there. Does the clinician begin to sit with anything uncomfortable, or do they begin to start creating thoughts, cognitions, or anything attached to something negative? But the thought behind it is being able to meet the client where they are. And as a Black clinician, Black clinic owner, and Black staff, we have clients that come in that say, there's so many things I don't have to say because we have this commonality and I don't have to explain. Or we talked about it earlier, don't have to unpack my bag to reteach or educate you on my story and on my life, because we have this common ground where we can say certain things and hear each other the same. But that's where I think it comes in, where when you have a clinician that's not BIPOC, be explorative. Ask the questions. One of the kind of common questions or frustrations that I hear with BIPOC clients is they don't ask. There's no asking, there's the assumption, there's the saying my name wrong, or as innocent as it may be, your hair's so nice, where'd you get that done at? Is it real? The innocence of that question, but the pain that it causes for us to have to educate. the pain that it causes, of the years of that. And so what I'm loving about this panel series is that we want for us all to be able to sit in our uncomfortableness, to be able to talk about it and be able to be the agents of change, whether you are white, you are Black, you are Asian, you are Spanish, or, you know, whatever community you subscribe to, but being able to have these conversations. And it starts even before the intake. If you do a consultation on the phone, if you do a consultation in person, it starts beginning there, because it's the rapport building. Can you meet them? Can you hear them? Can they feel seen, heard, and validated? And that's what a lot of clients are, I would say the majority of clients, if not all of them, are looking for, to be seen, heard, and getting their story out. Marcus, I see your hand up. I'm not sure it's for this one or the next one. Okay. So I want to go to the next question. In addition, I'm sorry.
I think Fiona wanted to say something too. I don't want to.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know how to raise my hand on this. Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of that, because I think like that what you're sharing is so important. Like, yes, it does. What I was going to say, it does start at that consultation and being able to just have that likeness and feel like, wow, okay, I don't have to say these things. And I think like, even as, you know, the intake is happening and you're asking these questions about this person's lived experience, there's this other piece that like, this is ongoing as we learn about their experiences. And one of the ways that like I systemically have done that is like, I do a genogram with every client. And that's something that I think we don't necessarily do. And we can learn so much from that, especially when it comes to that person's racial identity, their sexual identity, gender orientation, relational patterns. You can get so much in just that, you know, like, and I have used that in my like intake process of really the first few sessions, because I think intake isn't just that first session. It really is those first kind of rapport building sessions as you're getting to know your client.
Thank you for sharing, Fiona, and everyone who has shared thus far. I'll move to the next question. We're getting a few questions coming in, so I want to make sure we get to the majority of them. The next question is, in addition to the series, what trainings or books, resources would you recommend that clinic owners provide for additional training? So we have a packet that we did put together, but we weren't able to get that out. So that is something that we'll follow up after. And it has resources, books, trainings, terms. So it's filled with a lot of information that will come out. We have everyone's email address that's in attendance or not, or hasn't been able to attend. So we'll be sure to get that out as well. Andy?
Thanks. I want to just reflect on a bunch of years of doing this, that conversations have made the difference. And I really appreciate anybody reading a book, right? Kendi, Stamped from the Beginning. Kendi, you know, Archer, How to Be an Anti-Racist Psychotherapist. There's certainly books written by women also. So there's a lot to know and to learn. I appreciate it. On the list you have Baldwin's movie also, right? So there's definitely a lot of work to be done through reading and watching, and fundamentally, like, being able to ask a question to somebody and to be able to navigate the awkwardness of it is more potent. So I don't want to leave out that interactive and live and community is potentially more helpful than books and movies.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for sharing. The next question. I am in my first year of my master's program at the University of Denver, which emphasizes the facets of diversity, inclusivity, and multicultural orientation. This program focuses highly on adult clients and approaches which are applicable to adults. At my internship site, I work primarily with adolescents and early adulthood. What are some ways in which multiculturalism and diversity can be catered to these developmental levels? I see everyone trying to move off mute. Marcus?
So I've always had this theory that as soon as someone has the question, they are appropriate to have an appropriate response to their question. right? So if they're asking a question, give them an appropriate response. The real thing about amongst this population is ask them, why are they curious? What makes you curious about this? What are you experiencing? I often, when I do not know the answer to things, ask the person, well, what do you know about it? How did you come to learn about it? Right? And so it's giving them that opportunity to explore it that way. And then you start to find out, oh, well, they overheard a conversation, or they were a part of an experience that made them uncomfortable and they just don't know what to do with the feelings, right? But even, and I even have this theory with small kids around some other, concepts that seem to be taboo, because that's really what we're getting at. It's like, how do we have these taboo conversations with populations that we may not know how to respond to? Well, one of the first things that I do is, what made you curious about this? Have you heard this before? Have your friends talked about this? What have they said? Open-ended questions, right? Lead them to get you to where you need to be. And then use evidence-based practices, right? Whenever you're unsure of what may be, go to what the evidence really suggests, right? So evidence-based suggests that whenever you're uncomfortable about having questions about race, that you go and talk to someone that you think cares about you or you feel comfortable with to talk about these taboo things. And that through that, you start to become more aware of what you're not aware of. And then you can use it as an exercise, maybe even as an intervention of them just writing down what they're not aware of or what they're more curious about, so that you can explore it together.
I like that. That keeps us in the explorative stage. Thank you so much, Marcus, for sharing. I'm going to go to the next question in case anyone is ready to answer. So the next question, I'm wondering your thoughts on timeliness, scheduling, and the role of white supremacy and classism. How might I, as a white clinician, navigate these topics with clients who are late or cancel, change their schedule often while sticking with my boundaries of needing to keep my schedule or keep a schedule? Danica, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Well, my first thought regarding this question is, what are we connecting timeliness or lack of timeliness to that? Okay, because my thought is, I understand that this is probably being related to like CP time or colored people's time, or this idea that non-white people are late or perpetually late or don't respect time. So that in itself is a stereotype, right? Because I, as a Black clinician, I respect my own boundaries. I stick to a schedule. I'm on time. So I don't really, I don't know how to answer this question because it is rooted in a stereotype. It is rooted in this idea that non-white people are operating in this different kind of, at least to me, that's what it sounds like. So I don't know if someone else has a different opinion. I'm not sure how to answer this question.
So,
Maybe
go ahead, Eddie.
I try to translate. Like, what I'm really impressed by the four of you is your comfort and your assurance that at least you're presenting. I don't know how you feel on the inside, but you have comfort with the dialogue. And I think, in my experience working with white people, is there's a lot of fragility and fear, right? Of like, I think, maybe I said something to a Black person a long time ago and they said something to me like, that's privilege, that you would think that, or you're doing white supremacy right now. And they called me in, but it still stung. And then, a few years later, I'm in a situation with somebody who is, not coming on time or something like that. And if I say to them, these are my boundaries and I need you to come on time like that, there's a little fear that they might say, hey, it's privileged of you to ask for that. And I think that that's kind of nonsense. I think it's kind of turned around there. I think as clinicians, we have the right to, like we're talking about, like hold control of therapy, time of start and things like that. And just, if we're afraid that, and white people are afraid, right, of this, right? If they're going to say, you know, this is a white expectation that you have or something like that, that we're going to be in an enactment, right? There's going to be awkwardness and kind of tough feelings. And I think maybe what we're looking for, or what I'm looking for here, I don't want to speak for the white people, is you know, how to handle that enactment. Like, say I step in it, you know, which y'all know what that means. And then there is like, what are we doing here? You know, and I think we all have to train in that as clinicians, regardless of race, class, and gender. We still have to be able to hold our seat and model rupture and repair. And I wonder if you have some thoughts, if we could just stretch the question out into that. Thanks.
Well, I'll answer this one because we're running on time, so I'm so excited because questions keep coming in. But there's a difference with setting boundaries and really looking at white supremacy. As clinicians, we have our boundaries. So as I'm reading this, and I had a little bit more time just to sit with it, and to me, it's sounding like the clinician is trying to set boundaries with a client who may be in the BIPOC population. And I'm gonna tag in with Danica, and the client may have said, well, this is CP time. This is something that Black people have. This is what we do. It is a stereotype and it is a derogatory term in actuality, where we may joke and say, oh, I'm on CPT time, where we know CPT. We're all clinicians, but being on CP time, which is derogatory. So I would encourage the clinician, stand firm in your boundaries, refer back to your disclosure statement, model for your client, being able to hold them accountable. At the same time, sitting with an understanding, is there a socioeconomic status? Is there something happening at home? Is there more to the picture that's happening? We don't necessarily know. We're going off of the question, but if we're serving underserved individuals, people on Medicaid, low-income individuals, there's a different dynamic that's there. So I'm going to I am assuming the best about this question that is here, and the client probably challenging the clinician with, you're white supremacist, you're this because you're not honoring CPT time. CPT, I keep saying it, CP time versus there are boundaries. Honor my time. Don't minimize yourself either as the clinician. So being able to honor your boundaries with that. And I think Fiona said it, refer back to your supervisor, you know, with that. We have 5 minutes left. We do have several questions. I will ask some of the clinicians, if you can, that are the panelists, to go into the questions and at least type the questions back to the individuals that have shared. And I want to thank everyone for attending. I want to be able to give the panelists to be able to share some last minute comments before we wrap up. So we'll start in the order that we began. Fiona, would you like to begin?
Sure. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I think this, like, I experienced a little discomfort in answering some of these questions and really sitting with them, and just talking about this topic and how it shows up for us as clinicians. But I appreciate everybody who asked a question, who's here, who is doing the work and wanting to learn more. And I think if there, you know, we're always accessible as well. If you have, you know, additional questions after this, I know you can definitely reach out to me or Yakita or anybody if you have additional questions that come up after this, after sitting and processing.
Thank you so much.
And I definitely echo Fiona. This is very challenging work, and it's not anything that we're going to solve in just an hour and a half, right? It's not even anything that we've solved in over 250 years. And so the fact that you're giving up an evening to want to have a discussion shows your commitment. I do hope that you keep coming back to these panels, because they're going to be lively discussions that's going to help us all be better clinicians. I thank you for your time, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you, Marcus.
I'd like to just thank everyone for being here, and I want to just remind everyone, we shouldn't get so caught up in being afraid to be viewed as racist or classist or whatever other ism that comes up. We're human, and that experience is what unites us all, right? We're human, and meeting every human to human where they are is the most important thing within the therapeutic process. I thank you all for being here. Thank you for having me. If you need to reach out, feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Danica. Andy, would you like to share anything?
I have great hope and optimism for America. America's values are really a pluralistic society that was founded on a freedom of religion to escape a king. And I don't think we should have a hierarchy of, I don't know how we're going to avoid a hierarchy of class, but certainly of gender, and certainly of race. And this kind of work is the America that I want to live in, and for anyone to have a fair shake and to be able to get competent mental health care, I think is the goal here. So I really appreciate the beginning steps and the opportunity, and so appreciate the panelists. Thank you so much.
And I will wrap it up. Again, last minute housekeeping, there's a survey that's going to go out. We are also going to send out a PDF with resources, additional information for everyone to be able to get a chance to look at. And the idea is that this is an ongoing series. And as Marcus said, this is going to take time. We're still carrying on and trying to carry the torch for the BIPOC community. And this is to include, I also want to include white clinicians, non-BIPOC clinicians, that we're in this together if we're in this helping field. So having the heart to be able to help the people that we have come into this field with. So just thanking you all for spending the evening with us. Hopefully we will see you again. We do have the questions. I did not say anyone's name, but we will be trying to get to all of the questions so no one feels left out. So we'll be getting to that as well. But thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you in the additional series that will be coming up.